Hello, my name is Lee Mallon, and I am here today to tell you all about how you use generative AI to create a generative AI API that returns generative AI data. Now that is a mouthful. Let's get started. So what is a generative AI API? Well, I've been thinking like we all create APIs, we use code, but what if you could actually create an API with a language instead of code? So what if you could take a language first approach? So instead of writing out if this, if that, select this, grab this, you actually could just describe the API such as return back to me 10 products that we sold really well last week and bring back the title, the image, and the price point. And then I started thinking like, how would you even go about building such a thing? And would it be very difficult? The first thing was, can you turn your prompts into an API? So can you take the prompt that you put into ChatGPT or whatever tool, and can that become the basis of your API? Can you control the formatting? Can you basically create an element of repeatability in this so you actually get something out that is sensible? And it turns out you can. But why would you want to do this? Well, to be honest, there's some pros and cons, and the main ones are, from a pro point of view, it makes it more accessible. It means not just software developers can build APIs. And you might ask, like, why would a non-software developer want to build an API? But we are going more and more towards these no-code tools when less and less typically trained software developers are building solutions with things like Slack, Teams, Notion, etc., etc. And what if they could actually just generate an API of information they need using language and plug it into the relevant tool? That would be pretty amazing. You can really iterate on the creation of your API by just adding more prompts and tweaking the data, which I'll walk you through how I did this, which just means it's so much quicker to build. It's really impressive. The negatives for it, the cons are like, using generative APIs are slow, but you can mitigate that with some kind of caching. They do produce unpredictable values. I had it a couple of times. You can get more specific by basically saying, look, we want this name, we want this, but then that kind of loses the point. And obviously that comes with a cost. So, looking up a file on a server somewhere in the cloud is going to cost you micro pennies. Calling an API, generative API to generate you data, if you haven't got any caching or anything in place, is not going to be cheap. So how does or could this work? Well, let's have a look at this. Following on from the video I released around how I created a TripAdvisor clone for $53, I thought we'd keep on the theme of travel. So here we're basically getting a list of the 10 most populated cities in the world. Now, first of all, I didn't have to go to Wikipedia to get the list to sort them based on population. I just asked in the prompt, what are the 10 most populated cities in the world? And I got this back, which is pretty awesome. The one downside to it is it's not in a format that's actually massively useful to me, because if I call this over the API and I return it, like I'm going to have to take out the according to the latest United Nations estimates. I just want that Tokyo, Japan population in a format that's easy for me as a developer or as someone who wants to integrate with another system into a consistent format. Primarily JSON. JSON, JSON, is a format that pretty much most developers understand and also most systems understand. So if you can return your data in this format, you can do some quite interesting things with it. As you can see here, by just expanding on the prompt, by returning this data in a JSON format, I get the same information. It just comes back in this more machine readable way. Now, you could say that's it there. Cool, we've done it. Let's just grab that data, stick it in a file, and happy days. But things get quite interesting very quickly. I thought like, okay, so if I was now going to take this and put it into a database, what type of things would I do to this data? And could I actually just do it inside of ChatGPT? The answer was yes. So the first thing is I need to give it an ID. So basically I'm now saying, can you add an ID with an incremental number starting from 1? And that's what it did. Give me an ID, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. I then thought, well, what about, like, let's add some more properties. So now I want to add a description. So I'm going to say, add a description to each city and add a one-line sentence about that city to the description. And it just did it. It was unbelievable. Then after I did the city thing, it was then, okay, so now I want to bring them back. I can sort them, but let's just say the API I'm integrating with doesn't sort. Let's sort them in alphabetical order. So first of all, I just said, can you order the results from A to Z? But I didn't specify any fields. So it sorted them in a really bizarre way. As you can see, Delhi is showing at the top, and actually Beijing would be number one in this case. The way to resolve this was to be more specific in the prompt. So for example, by saying, can you order the results by city name from A to Z? Now, the first time I did this, it did resort them, but the ID numbers didn't change. And that's not a massive big deal. But again, it made me think, can I now get it to redo something that's already been done? So I just added to the prompt and then redo the IDs once the new order is done. So then Beijing was number one, Cairo was number two, etc., etc. Crazy cool. Off the back of that, I then thought, well, every website needs some kind of multilingual support. So what if we add some languages? There I took the city name property, which was before just in English, and said, can you basically create this in English, French, and German for every single city? Which it then did. OpenAI, I believe, is supported in 20 languages, so I can't see any reason why it wouldn't automatically work for them too. Now, I thought, let's spice it up a bit, let's get a bit more adventurous, and from the TripAdvisor project, this one didn't work that well last time, but I managed to figure out why. So now I wanted to add like some dynamic information. I wanted to push the limits to see what it could generate. So here, whenever you insert a record into, say, a database, or you retrieve one, you'll normally have like a created on stamp, date stamp. So I said, well, why don't we create one of these, and we'll just say, create something during the month of March in 2023, and basically, it did it. It created a timestamp for every single city that was different from the one before and added it to the JSON output. Okay, so now we thought we'd go a bit crazy and add images. Now, currently, ChatGPT doesn't have plugin support. It has plugin support in the way that people can try it, but you can't access it through the API yet. And we don't really know, as of yet, publicly, what the scope of the features are going to be, especially from an API point of view. So here, what I thought was, first of all, I just wanted it to grab like a random image. So I said, can you add just a random image from the internet? Which it did. It just basically put the URL for a placeholder image, as you can see here, and that placeholder image is a lovely, lovely puppy. Then I thought, well, what if you could take a random image, but you could merge one of the other properties into it? In this case, the country name. So basically, I want my image to be an image of China or Egypt or wherever. And again, I could basically merge the properties together. Now, the first time I ran this, it basically just appended the city of, basically appended onto the query of the placeholder image, city equals China, something like that. The second time I ran it, it then grabbed the flag of China and also from other countries as well, which was, again, shows that unpredictability of values, but also very interesting. Now, something that doesn't work, but I think will do in the near future. So I wanted to push the limits to probably the fullest extent in the way of saying, can this calculate data? And I fell victim to this myself on a previous experiment I was running where I wanted to generate a hash. A hash is a one-way cryptographic function that basically you can put a bit of text in, say like hello world. You can apply a hash to it. This is how passwords typically are secured. You can apply a hash to it, and then it will generate a random bit of string like this, gobbledygook here. And there's no way to go back to the original string. Now, there's a hashing system called MD5. It's very old, not very secure nowadays, and most of the hashes have been generated. So you can kind of reverse engineer what the text is. So I put in the MD5 hash that GPT generated, and it couldn't find anything. I then did the real hash of MD5 of the word China, and this is the correct hash, and this was the wrong one. So two things here. One, and this is the hallucination argument that we hear a lot of, there was no indication to me that this was incorrect, which is something that we just have to basically take an element of like, do we trust this information, in a whole? That being said, I don't think it'll be long before with the few stuff we've seen with plugins already, people experimenting, whereby I could say, add the software development plugin, and then when I ask for an MD5 hash, it actually goes off, generates the hash, and brings it back and pulls it into the feed. So now I've basically constructed this whole document by iteratively generating the prompts. I then asked ChatGPT, can you just give me the full prompt that would generate this output? And it did. It basically gave me this prompt, and as you can see, it's very similar to kind of pseudocode kind of structure. It's probably less languagey than I think you could be more verbose and less like it seems very machine readable in some ways. But I can take that prompt now and enter it, and it will basically generate that output. So I thought I'd give it a try and see what happens. So I basically dropped the prompt in, and it generated that output. You'll notice here there's a created by stamp at the top of the overall thing. That's because I did something earlier that I messed up on, but you can just kind of forget it. The main thing in here that changed, most of it was identical. The only thing really was that under the city names, the language, instead of saying English, French, and German, it basically used the language codes. So I think if I was going to do the prompt again, I would probably just say, can you create different versions with language code and value or name, just so I got a consistent, as much of a consistent response back for the language code that I could get. Now, the bit where it then got really crazy is, so then I took this and I was like, oh, that was pretty cool. What if I now put this into an API? Which I did. I actually got ChatGPT to write me the code for the API, and it actually put the prompt into the code. So I literally copy and pasted the code. It's for an Azure function, dropped it into Visual Studio Code, and basically just uploaded it. And you can access it by going to this URL here, which I'll put in the description, as well as with all the other prompts that we've used today. And it basically will return you the top 10 countries with them fields by population. It opens up quite an interesting thought process now of what if, this is an API that was generated by Generative API, returning data that was also generated by a Generative API. We get very inception-y very quickly. But it does make you think, like, can we start to create more language-first APIs, which means millions upon millions, if not billions of people can start to actually use technology more to the fullest. That's my presentation. If you've got any questions about this or any theories of how we could make it better, please let me know. Email, web, and LinkedIn. I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks so much.